After having almost completed its 10.5-hour journey from Beijing to London, a British Airways Boeing 777 crashed onto the grass just meters short of runway 27 left in Heathrow. Today we are going to take a look on what led to the strange crash of British Airways Flight 38. Welcome to Airspace. British Airways Flight 38 took off from Beijing about 10.5 hours before the accident to what would be an uneventful flight until just before landing. The pilots considered the weather along their route, which was normal by most standards. Only the expected outside air temperature was reported to be rather low at cruising altitude. Due to this, the crew decided they would monitor the fuel temperature very closely. Usually, temperatures at cruising altitude range between -50 and -70 degrees Celsius. Therefore, it is crucial that the pilots monitor the fuel temperature, since the most commonly used aviation fuel, called Jet A1, starts to freeze around -44 degrees Celsius. While it freezes, it produces a waxy substance that can clog the fuel system and lead to engine flameouts. During the entire flight, these fuel temperatures remained at or above -34 degrees Celsius, well within limits. When the flight reached London Heathrow, it was directed to approach runway 27 left. The aircraft was nicely configured and ready for landing when it passed 1,000 feet above the ground, about 3 nautical miles out from the runway. Just moments later, 57 seconds before touchdown, thrust of the right engine reduced, and just 7 seconds later, thrust for the left engine reduced as well. Both engines did not stop running but continued to provide thrust just above idle values. Imagine stopping at a red light with your car, and when you later want to drive on as it turns green, the engine is running, but as you push the accelerator, nothing happens. I bet you would be baffled. The pilots of British 38 surely must have been. 27 seconds before touchdown, the aircraft speed had reduced below their intended approach speed of 135 knots. The pilots were now intensively searching for the reason that their engines did not respond to any commands. Moments later, the 777 warned the pilots that airspeed was becoming dangerously low. The commander tried to ameliorate the situation by reducing the angle of the landing flaps from 30 degrees to 25, reducing the aircraft's drag by some margin. The investigation later found that this action elongated the glide by 50 meters. 10 seconds before touchdown, the so-called stick shaker activated. This is a vibrator that shakes the control column of the aircraft, indicating to the pilot that the airspeed is very low and the nose of the plane should be lowered immediately. The first officer who was flying the plane did exactly that, avoiding a stall but increasing the rate of descent substantially. Seconds before impact, the commander transmitted a mayday call.
Mayday, mayday, speedbird, 95, 95.
The first officer now tried to smooth the landing somewhat by pulling back on the control column. He succeeded only partially since the aircraft's response was slow due to the low airspeed. The plane touched down hard just 110 meters inside the airport fence, clearing a packed parking lot and a gas station by mere meters. It slammed into the grass, 330 meters short of runway 27 left. During the ground roll, all landing gears collapsed and the right main landing gear separated from the aircraft. It hit the passenger cabin, punching a hole through the fuselage. Fortunately, no fire started after the plane came to rest. Fire services responded and were at the aircraft quickly. The commander initiated an evacuation, first on the radio frequency by mistake, then inside the plane.
Captain, Mr. Captain, this is an emergency. Evacuate, evacuate.
The final report of the event describes the evacuation as efficient and fast, with some passengers trying to bring their carry-on luggage, a problem that often arises during evacuations where everything should be left behind. One passenger even decided to climb up one of the evacuation slides, get his suitcase and evacuate again. There were only minor injuries, with the exception of one unlucky passenger who was hit by the main landing gear strut when it hit the cabin. He received a broken leg. Could have been much worse, if you ask me. But what led to the loss of thrust on both engines? Investigators were happy to find the plane in relatively good shape after the crash landing. In what I found one of the most meticulous investigations I have ever read about, they attempted to find the reason for the malfunctions. Rather quickly, the investigators were able to determine that an obstruction in the fuel system must have caused the problem. They looked for foreign objects and found 5 pieces that didn't belong: a plastic scraper, 2 pieces of tape, and 2 paper snippets. All would have been probably left there by accident during the production of the plane. However, the investigators determined that these could not have caused the problem. They then went on to rebuild the fuel system of the 777 in a laboratory capable of reproducing the temperatures and fuel flows experienced on the accident flight. What they found was rather astonishing. But to understand the next section, I must first explain to you this part right here. It is called a fuel oil heat exchanger. Since engine oil gets very hot and jet fuel gets very cold in flight, this temperature difference is used to cool the oil and heat the fuel. Cold fuel is pumped through these small tubes while oil is pumped around them, leading to a very beneficial and efficient heat exchange. Reproducing the environmental conditions experienced on British Airways Flight 38, the team was able to prove that ice can build up inside the fuel lines at fuel temperatures between +5 and -20 degrees Celsius. Between -5 and -20 degrees, the ice was described as being sticky, sort of like soft ice on a cone. The water for this ice originates from the fuel itself, since all aviation fuels contain small trace amounts of water. As the flight continued into colder air, the buildup of ice stopped when the fuel temperature dropped below -20 degrees, but the ice remained inside the pipes. As the aircraft descended into warmer air on approach, the ice started to soften again. A combination of warmer air and fuel at lower altitude, turbulence and increased fuel flow due to the engine acceleration on approach led to a simultaneous release of large amounts of ice. This ice then traveled down the pipework in what investigators described as a snowball, coming to rest on the face of the fuel oil heat exchanger. With the fuel lines protruding 4 mm away from the hot oil containment, the ice built up there, clogging the heat exchanger almost completely, leading to the loss of thrust in both engines. During the investigation, the team looked at data from 175,000 other flights of the same aircraft type and found out that out of all of them, only British Airways Flight 38 fulfilled all of the unfortunate criteria that led to the significant ice buildup and release thereof during approach. There was only one other 777 by Delta Airlines that experienced a similar problem at cruising altitude, but the conditions were slightly different. After the cause of the accident was clear, Boeing modified the heat exchanger of the 777's Trent 800 engines by removing the protrusions of the fuel lines into the heat exchanger. This heat exchanger proved to be much more capable than the old one, and the modification of existing parts was made mandatory shortly after. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe for many more aviation videos to come. See you in the next one.